part of the reason, and I'm not using this as a blanket excuse for all of this, because I think most of my nitpicks come from the fact that it does so, because you're right, Andrew, I don't know if we needed another trench run, I don't know if we needed another Death Star type thing, but I think part of the reason that's there is because, and I know we have some people on this podcast who have very strong opinions about the prequels that are not conventional opinions, but I think it's fair to say the prequel trilogy lost a lot of Star Wars fans. And so, for better or worse, in order to get those people back on board, I don't know if he had to do this, but I feel like a very easy way to do that is to, get, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford back to do the things that people loved a long time ago. And it's certainly fair to question whether or not that worked as a movie, but I feel like I understand why that stuff is there.
Yeah, I think I absolutely understand why it's there. And I totally understood. I see where they were going. I understand. It was on the level of we want to get people on board, it was a good move. That said, it pretty foundationally undermines what I like about Star Wars, which was my main struggle about the movie, because up to this point, Star Wars was this sort of, Lucas is this awkward sort of genius who bumbles along, makes awkward genius movies. But I think at the end of the day, they're his vision. They're not beholden to this fan base that sort of has this ridiculous need to control and micromanage it. So this is, to my mind, and again, this is the most negative side of me talking about The Force Awakens in this case. This isn't my whole experience with the movie, but The Force Awakens was the series finally caving to the demands, the obsessive sort of controlling need of the fan base to tell the series what to do. It did precisely what they told it to do, and then they all rejoiced about it. But in my experience, the Star Wars series is one of the only major blockbuster film series that was, up to this point, never beholden to that sort of acidic, aggressive, you raped my childhood mentality. I mean, yeah, people said it, but Lucas was still doing what he wanted to do, and this is the first time where, it stopped and bowed to what they were demanding, and I don't know.
It's super ironic that you say that. You're probably right. I mean, I guess that's accurate, an accurate portrayal here. But it's ironic that that's the case, because this movie goes after the fans. I mean,
I think the movie says a lot about fan culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does.
J.J. Abrams is not a fan of fan communities, and it's within the confines of a movie that's giving the fans what they want, but he is giving the finger to fans.
A little. I agree with you to an extent, Paul, and we'll get to that in a second. But Ken, I haven't heard from you. What's your take on all this?
Okay, so if it's your choice, but this discussion we're having right now, that's the monologue I have prepared for this episode, you guys.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry. This discussion is what the movie is actually about, is how difficult this behemoth of a task was going into it. As soon as this was announced, everybody was just they had no idea what was going to happen, right? And the expectations, we all lived through it over the past week, how high those expectations were exactly 1 week ago, right? So it's got to be very difficult going into this. We all know, JJ said many times, he didn't want this job at first. He loved that it was offered to him, that he didn't think that it would be right for a fan to do it, to not have Lucas do it. The whole deal was weird and difficult, and then it took a while for him to come around. But I think if we really examine what happens in the movie, we might see what he believes and his intention was here. Okay, the very first line of the movie that's spoken is, "This will begin to make things right." Mm-hmm. So we all have to accept, he had on his shoulders over the last 3 years possibly being called Jar Jar Abrams for the rest of his life, right? We have to accept that maybe not among our generation, Andrew and AJ, but among everyone who's in Hollywood, most people in the world have agreed that the prequels are failures. I don't agree with that, but in order to move forward, we have to accept that that was the case. And there's a very telling line in the movie where Finn says, "Why does everyone want to go back to Jakku?" Now, Jakku, what is Jakku? We're talking about the parallels, right? Jakku's Tatooine. Mm-hmm. Tatooine's where it all starts, both times previously, right? And I think that's a very big struggle, is this what everyone wants? Do they just want us to go back to the original place where we all fell in love with this thing? And I think the magic trick of the movie really is that, like, despite all of my problems with the story and the character beats and the stuff that made me angry the first time I saw it, that it's given us enough nostalgia and continuation of the old characters' stories and so much of the new characters by that point that by the climax, we're not even thinking about the old characters. We're just involved with them. So, nostalgia. The first time we get any nostalgia outright in the movie is when Rey and Finn are running towards the Millennium Falcon. And she's like, that's garbage. Thing blows up. Cuts over to the Falcon. The whole audience cheers, right? Did everyone cheer in all you guys' theaters?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Amazing moment. I love that reveal. And that was the most fan service I wanted out of the movie, really, is like giving us that moment of like, and here you go, maybe once. I have a lot of problems with a lot of the fan service and the rest of the movie, but hey, that's my opinion. That's not what I'm objectively examining here. So if we were to look at on a story level, since that's the very first thing we saw from the OT, what would be the perfect vehicular representation of the original trilogy? It's obviously the Millennium Falcon, right? And since that's the first thing we see, that's how we're going to look at it for the rest of this discussion anyways. If the Millennium Falcon is the original trilogy, then who is its original pilot? George
Lando
Lucas.
Calrissian.
We all know it as Han Solo. So what I'm arguing is that Han Solo is George Lucas. We're going to lose him. And JJ, not wanting to be called Jar Jar, has now renamed himself Ray Abrams, the new pilot of the Millennium Falcon, all right? So he's teamed up with Finn, who I really haven't got this down here. I'm still working on this theory, all right? He's either Disney, just wanting to move forward and do right and not harm innocent people like the prequels did, or simply personifying JJ's fear and not wanting to go back into making Star Wars and possibly disappointing people. But anyway, they both somehow managed to get the Millennium Falcon off the ground. And it's a rough start. They don't know how they're doing it. They're like, as they're getting in the position, they're both like, I can do this. They're having to convince themselves. And the fucking Falcon goes through hell at first. It is like being smashed and it happens later through the trees. Like this, the original trilogy is being knocked around, right? But eventually, as they work together, they figure out how to fly it right. And Finn, whose turret is stuck in the forward position, basically Disney saying, we're not going back to the prequels. Due to Ray Abrams flying, they still hit their target. Now, let's look at Kylo Ren. He's and I'd seen this meme sort of like shared around on the internet before the movie came out, that just the symbolism of a hooded white guy versus a girl and a black dude was very obvious. And it sort of speaks to like fan culture, right? Like if you look at Kylo Ren, he's got this real scary mask, right? But when he takes it off, Adam Driver in this movie, he looks so young. He's just a kid, a little angry kid who throws fits. And he covers himself up with this badass looking thing, just like most every angry nerd on Twitter, Gamergator, anyone out there who has talked shit on anything just because they're not really happy with where they're at.
Because you brought this up, I want to talk about Kylo Ren, in particular the fact that he represents everything that is wrong with fandom. Because I've made no bones about it on this show. I enjoy being a fan of things. I do not particularly enjoy fandoms or fan communities. I've had a lot of negative experiences with those sorts of. It's like organized religion. Like I'm okay with believing. I just don't want to have to be in a church with these assholes. But Kylo Ren, I think it's such an interesting tack for who is presumably the new villain to basically be a douchebag wimp, the galaxy's #1 Darth Vader stan. I mean, he is so childish, and so I feel like he's trying so hard. He's so focused on the aesthetics of everything. Like that moment you mentioned, Ken, where up to that point in the movie, we had not seen him with his helmet off, and obviously in the originals, Darth Vader taking off his helmet was a huge reveal, save for the very end of the series. And when he takes his helmet off, he's beautiful. Like Adam Driver looks beautiful in that scene. And I thought that was I know some people were underwhelmed by that. I think a couple people in the audience kind of giggled because it was so not what was expected.
I think that was intentional.
Yeah.
But I think that is a brilliant moment because it that's the heart of who this character is. There is no real reason for him to do that for other than, he's seen it done before and he wants to be cool. Like, for example, with the broadsword lightsaber with the two little, the handle
Quillins.
blades or whatever. That is utterly pointless, and that was mocked online beforehand. But I think that is another element, along with wearing the mask, that just shows this guy is into the aesthetics of it. He wants to be a cool badass, and he's not. And I love the Gamergate comparison, because I feel like in another galaxy, Kylo Ren would be one of those guys behind the keyboard, like, girls can't play video games.
Well, he's the angry white guy obsessed with the former regime that's already been destroyed. He's worshiping that helmet that's already been burnt to a crisp. I mean, there's nothing more for you there, man. It's really pathetic. It's so funny how, like, Darth Vader obviously needed that helmet. That's why, like, it added to it being badass and stuff, but it was necessary for him. Kylo Ren just does it to fucking look cooler than he ever is because he's so afraid of facing the fact that he's just been Solo.
And I think one thing you mentioned that when he takes off the mask he looks beautiful. The thing that struck me was when he takes off the mask, and at first I had to like mull over whether or not this was intentional, but the more I thought about it, the more I watched the movie, the more I realized it had to be intentional. He's the spitting image of Anakin Skywalker when he takes off his mask. He is young Revenge of the Sith era Anakin, fresh-faced. You got the flowing hair.
By the end of the movie, he gets the scar. Yeah,
he gets the scar.
Yeah.
And he's literally trying to embody his legacy so bad, but in all these ways that he doesn't need to. Like underneath the mask, he is Anakin without ever being burnt. And then he puts on the mask, and he just wants to be Darth Vader so bad. He has a little 3-pronged lightsaber, which is a little reminiscent of double-bladed light. I mean, he's so aware of his own legacy, I think, is one of the things that makes him interesting. But he's so insecure, and he's so whiny, and he's such a little douche that it's almost interesting. I'm still mulling it over, but I really genuinely found it interesting just how distinct all the different images that were put on him were, that were obvious. So much of every single part of him is a callback to some previous badass stone cold killer villain in this series. But he is so not any of those. He is not Darth Maul. He's not Darth Vader. He's not even Anakin at the end of the day, because at least Anakin was famous for being good at stuff.
Right. Yeah.
This little douchebag, what has he done? He doesn't do anything. He talks a lot of crap. He whines. He throws tantrums. People awkwardly avoid him when he's having his emotional breakdowns. Like, I mean, he really sticks out as an incredibly bold story decision, an incredibly bold direction to take the villain, that he's not the next Darth Vader. He is a very pointed commentary on quite a few things, to be totally honest. And I thought that was one of the movie's really notable, brilliant moves.
While still coming off as a Skywalker with he's sort of the Skywalker interim baby taken up to 11.
That's the other cool part, because he believes that the legacy belongs to him just because it's his birthright. He is the angry white guy. But then who does the Force call to? He calls to Rey, and she takes the lightsaber from him, even though he's a Skywalker. Which I thought was an incredibly powerful moment in the film, when it just flies past him and directly into the hands of this nobody, this young woman who is not a Skywalker, who has no, by the logic that the series had previously operated on, had no right to that item, yet the Force calls to her. It doesn't call to him because he's a little dickhead.
And yet immediately in the middle of their fight, he's like, "Come with me, I can train you."
Oh yeah, no, he cops out.
She's already kicking your ass.
Oh yeah, totally.
She doesn't need your training.
Actually, Pam,
tantrum baby.
Pam pointed out to me that the two times that she makes the greatest leaps in her subconscious Force abilities are both in direct response to him. He is her trainer. He is her teacher in this film, because like the first time was when he was interrogating her and it wasn't working, and basically she learned how to do what she did by imitating him. Like, he's drilling into her head and she realizes she can push back and drill into his. And then at the end when he's like, "I can teach you the ways of the Force," and she remembers all of a sudden, "Oh yeah, Maz told me to close my eyes and concentrate." So like both times that she makes these quantum leaps forward in her Force ability, it's because of him.
That's interesting.
By the way, the lightsaber is Star Wars, because JJ finally got to open up his mystery box.
Jesus.
Jeez.
So he's basically every way too loud troll who ends up killing Han, his family, who is George Lucas, the person who created him. And that's why it's so tragic, is that the fan, born into a love of Star Wars from this guy, ended up being the people that had to kick him out of the entire thing. And just a few scenes earlier, Han had said, "That's why I have to leave, so you'll miss me." And that's the tragedy of it all. And that's what this movie is about, is how they didn't know how they were going to move forward unless they paid homage to the fact that everybody seems to only want the originals. I don't know if that's how things are going to go from here on out. I really hope not. But it seemed to get everybody back on board to follow that simple formula. And if that's what it took for me to have all that those angry complaints, then goddamn it, it might all be worth it.
Well, Ken, I feel the need to have you on every time we discuss any major blockbuster movie, just so you can, as you did with this and Jurassic World, just lay out in an epic monologue why the movie is about the executives who made it.
That was profound. Jeez.
So George Lucas has been quoted as saying that the Star Wars films are like a symphony and that the themes are going to recur and recur every time. I feel like the Gobbledygeek Symphony, the theme that recurs, that people are going to start demanding from every season, perhaps every episode of Gobbledygeek, is that Ken come on and give some really sophisticated, possibly drug-induced analysis of whatever film we're talking about.
I'm pretty sure that Ken put more thought into the story structure of that movie than J.J. Abrams has ever put into the story structure of anything he has ever made.
Whoa! Ouch. Okay, let's hope J.J. Abrams doesn't have internet. I can't be seen involved in this now. That was savage.
All right, AJ, do you have any questions left after that?
I think Ken answered them all. We're done with the podcast.